What happened to Aang at the end of Avatar? After the war, Aang played a major role in the Harmony Restoration movement, leading to a conflict with Zuko over the fate of the Fire Nation colonies. They eventually resolved their differences peacefully at Iroh's tea shop. Aang then helped Zuko find his mother and also demonstrated his improved spiritual pressure. From here, Aang transformed his Avatar fan club into the new Air Acolytes, who would then take care of the Air Temples and preserve the Air Nomad culture. This was all while he revived the Avatar Yangchang festival. Aang then assisted Zuko again when alleged spirits attacked the Fire Nation, which turned out to be Azula's group, causing chaos pretending to be spirits. He then helped Sokka and Katara resolve conflicts between the northern and southern water tribes. He would then go to Cranefish Town and stop the war between benders and non-benders and eventually turn it into Republic City, where a statue would be erected in his honor. Later, he and Zuko found a new herd of sky bison. Aang would then finally marry his cupcake Katara, and then they would have 3 children. He would then take away the criminal Yokoin's bloodbending and then pass away peacefully at the age of 66, with his only regret being that he never revived the Air Nation. What happens to Iroh at the end of Avatar? Well, as we know at the end of the series, Iroh does get this awesome tea shop where he serves the team some tea. Iroh eventually becomes the backbone of Team Avatar as everybody comes to him for wisdom and advice. He tries his best to guide the future generation, as well as teach them the importance of tea. And when Zuko does go off to find his mom, Iroh actually gets promoted to interim Fire Lord for a time. And with his brief stint of power, Iroh creates a holiday called National Tea Day. Now you're probably wondering how Iroh died. When Iroh actually believed that his business in the mortal world was finished, he chose to leave the physical world and travel to the spiritual world. And in the Legend of Korra, we get to learn that he's in the spiritual world serving tea to all the spirits, which I think was actually so wholesome. Have you ever wondered what happened to Appa after the 100-Year War? Well, after the war, Appa is seen in Ba Sing Se with Team Avatar celebrating at Iroh's tea shop. The group would later ride Appa swiftly into the sky doing aerial tricks before the fireworks for the Earth King's celebration of the Harmony Restoration movement. From here, Appa would help transport Fire Nation colonists back to their initial homelands. Appa would also act as the main source of transportation in the search for Zuko's mom. And he would also help battle a giant spirit wolf. Now at the time, whenever people saw Appa, they knew that Avatar was close behind, since he was the only sky bison to live past the Air Nation genocide. At least that's what we thought, until Zuko and Aang found a new herd of sky bison on remote islands on their journey. In his later years, Appa continued to fly Team Avatar, even Aang's children, around and got to know and watch them grow up. There was even an incident where Appa is seen flying Aang to Republic City Police Station to help bail Tenzin out of some trouble. This takes place somewhere around the year 130 AG. Appa would eventually pass away due to a broken heart after losing his best friend Aang. What happened to Azula after the war? Well, Azula was committed to a mental facility following her breakdown after the Agni Kai with Zuko and Katara. A year later, Zuko would visit her to ask for help in finding their mother. And during this adventure, Azula would break down further mentally, showing how bad her mommy and daddy issues really are. She would then form a group called the Fire Warriors and try impersonating the Kamirage spirits to disrupt the Fire Nation and push Zuko to become a fair-driven leader. Azula would also kidnap her half-sister Kaya and other children, leading to a confrontation with Zuko where she declared victory and just vanished. Later, we learn that the Fire Warriors would eventually abandon her due to how she treated them. Eventually, Azula would end up at the Fire Sage Temple, where a spirit would test her with visions of her past, offering her a chance at redemption. Azula would reject this offer and choose to not be manipulated, and saying she would follow her own path after disappearing once more. What happens to the cabbage merchant after the 100-Year War? Well, the first thing he does is try his best at setting up a restaurant that sells cabbages. That falls through, so he eventually shifts his focus to technology, and he becomes the #1 seller in affordable automobiles, machinery, and other sorts of technology, as we see in the Legend of Korra. Funny enough, he does name this company Cabbage Corp as a reference to his love for the green vegetable. It's also good to note that his business does actually sell cabbages on the side, but it's not their main source of income. What happened to Katara at the end of Avatar? After the war, Katara aided Aang in the Harmony Restoration movement and would later join Team Avatar in the quest to find Zuko and Azula's mother. Upon returning to the Southern Water Tribe with Sokka, Katara reunited with her family and met Master Pakku's students, helping new waterbenders and fighting off thieves and bandits. Through this trip, she learned from Sokka the importance of letting go of the past for a better future. Katara continued her involvement with Team Avatar, helping to stop conflicts between benders and non-benders in Cranefish Town, which eventually became Republic City. She would eventually marry Aang and had 3 children, Bumi, Kaya, and Tenzin. Katara finally played a crucial role in outlawing bloodbending in Republic City after the Yokoin incident, and remained an advisor and benefactor to the White Lotus in finding and training the next Avatar, Korra, where she helped Korra and provided guidance to her and the new Team Avatar. At the end, Katara is depicted spending peaceful time with her family and grandchildren and taking things a little slow in her old age. What happened to Momo at the end of Avatar? After the war, Momo would continue to join the group on many adventures, holding holding back his great power as he refused to participate in most events, just focusing on eating. As he figured Team Avatar would need to face these challenges in order for them to grow, let's not forget that Momo is the first ever earthbending lemur. And in later years, in the book that Aang wrote to his son Tenzin, we learned that Momo was still alive alongside Appa around 124 AG. And it is assumed that Momo actually died before Appa and Aang, and may have even had a family of lemurs. What happens to Zuko at the end of Avatar? Well, Zuko firstly becomes Fire Lord. After that, he goes on to confront his father, who is in a cell. Basically, he needs to know the real reason his mother left, or if she's still alive. Ozai can't really give him all the answers he needs, so he sets out on a journey to find his mother, which turns into this really crazy adventure. He even tries to repair the relationship between him and Azula. However, Azula has so much hatred in her, she's not able to really forgive him and goes off the rails even further. We also learn that they do eventually find the mother, and this is where Zuko gets his stepsister Kiyu, who actually looks up to Zuko. Zuko eventually invites them back to the Fire Nation to live with him, and as Zuko continues on, we learn he's having a lot of internal struggles because he's trying his best not to become his father, which causes a lot of conflict between him and Aang. Eventually, everything gets settled down and they become best buddies again, and this is where we jump to the legend of Korra, where we learn Zuko and Aang actually were able to obtain dragons for themselves. Zuko would eventually have a daughter named Izumi who would become the new Fire Lord. He would also save Korra from the Red Lotus and eventually gain a grandson which would be named after Iroh. What happened to Suki at the end of the war? Well, after the war, Suki and her Kyoshi warriors would first begin to help restoring peace in different areas of the world alongside Team Avatar. Then they would go on to be personal bodyguards for Fire Lord Zuko through many of the difficult trials and tribulations he faced in his reign. And it also seemed that her and Zuko might have grown a little too close, as we see in this scene here where she's kneeling, holding his hand, saying that she cares for him and worries for his safety. Around this time as well, we learn that her and Sokka's relationship is still going very strong, and eventually Suki would head to Cranefish Town along with Team Avatar, where she would end up teaching some non-benders the art of chi blocking in order for them to defend themselves against angry benders. And later in her life, around 124 AG, we learn that she is still serving as the Kyoshi warrior leader. And according to the book Aang wrote to his son Tenzin describing his life of his friends, he explains that Suki's skill was unrivaled, that even his uncle Sokka could only dream of obtaining this power. And when they were together, they made an amazing team. What happened to Mai at the end of Avatar? Well, after the 100-Year War, Mai would move into the royal palace with Zuko. Their relationship became strained as Zuko dealt with his responsibilities as Fire Lord, often shutting Mai out and keeping secrets, including his secret meetings with his father, Ozai. This would lead to their eventual breakup. Mai stayed in the Fire Nation, working for her aunt Mura's flower shop, and started dating a boy named Kylo. She later discovered that Kylo was part of the new Ozai Society, a group dedicated to overthrowing Zuko and reinstating Ozai to continue the war. Now, Mai, choosing to act as a double agent, helped Team Avatar stop the society. Throughout these events, Mai also learned that her father was a high-ranking member of the new Ozai Society. After the group was dismantled, Mai decided not to get back together with Zuko, instead focusing on herself. Now, in the legend of Korra, Zuko has a daughter named Izumi. While it's still unclear what happened to Mai, I personally believe that Zuko and her did get back together and she is actually Izumi's mother. What happens to Ozai at the end of Avatar? Well, after the climatic battle between Aang and Ozai, we learn that he loses his firebending powers. He is then sentenced to life in prison, where Zuko would keep him in a special prison cell so he will constantly have access to his father. Zuko even tries his best to build a better relationship with his father, but Ozai doesn't really want it. And if it wasn't for Ozai, Zuko would have never been able to find his mother. And when Zuko eventually finds his mother, and she comes back to live with him in the Fire Nation capital, the last confrontation we get to see is between Ursa and Ozai, where Ozai basically states that it was a mistake for Ursa to come back to the capital and she should have never returned. Ursa, finally standing strong and having the confidence to face him, shrugs him off and walks away. And this is the last we really get to see of Ozai. What happened to Sokka at the end of Avatar? After the war, Sokka helped with the Harmony Restoration movement. He then lent his skills to Toph's Metal Bending Academy. Sokka would then take a part in one of the adventures where Sokka reunited with her father at the Earthfire refinery and ended up defeating the rough rhinos and saving trapped miners. Sokka and Katara would eventually return to the Southern Water Tribe and reunite with their family, including Pakku, who married their grandmother. There they also intervened in a potential conflict between the Southern and Northern tribes over stolen oil. Sokka's diplomacy also stopped the aggression against Northerners residing in the South. Then Sokka would take part in the battle between benders and non-benders in Cranefish Town, saving the day with his boomerang. And finally, he would stay in Cranefish Town with Team Avatar, helping to turn it into Republic City. In Sokka's later life, he became chief of the Southern Water Tribe and served in the Council of Republic City. He then wrote about his adventures and shared his wisdom with his nephew Tenzin in Aang's book. Finally, Sokka's journey would end and he would eventually die between the years of 158 to 170 AG. What happens to General Zhao after being taken by the Ocean ocean spirit. Well, as the ocean spirit takes General Zhao in revenge for killing the moon spirit, he's dragged underwater and his body immediately perishes. But that's not all. Now, as we see in the Legend of Korra, where Tenzin and his siblings travel to the spirit world and stumble across the fog of lost souls, they hear somebody yelling and screaming in pain and agony, and this person turns out to be General Zhao. It seems like La, the ocean spirit, decided to punish General Zhao for eternity by keeping him here trapped to be tormented by his own mind. What happens to Toph at the end of Avatar? Well, after the war, Toph creates the first metal bending academy, teaching her first students Penga, the Dark One, and Hong To. With Sokka's help, she also reconciled with her father after a long event involving Team Avatar and a mining operation. Toph then assisted in resolving the crisis in Cranefish Town between benders and non-benders, which would eventually turn Cranefish Town into Republic City. In later years, Toph became the chief of police in Republic City, spreading metal bending worldwide. She had two daughters, Lin and Suyin. Lin followed in her footsteps as chief of police, while Suyin founded the first metal bending city. As an older woman, Toph lived in a swamp within the World Tree. She helped Korra recover from her mercury poisoning and guiding her to overcome her fears, remarking how wonderful it was to see Twinkle Toes again. Toph also played a significant role in the fight against Kuvira, destroying everything in her path to rescue her family. She would then retire back to the swamp where she continues to live. What happens to Ty Lee at the end of Avatar? Well, after the 100-Year War, Ty Lee actually gets recruited and joins the Kyoshi warriors, which is something she's really ecstatic about. She also goes on to teach the Kyoshi warriors her style of fighting, which is chi blocking. Now, Ty Lee, along with Suki and the other warriors, also act as personal bodyguards to Fire Lord Zuko for a time. Now, when it comes to the Legend of Korra, we don't actually know what happens to Ty Lee. However, we do understand that there are chi blockers in this era, and I would like to believe that they actually learned this form of fighting from Ty Lee's teachings, as once the Kyoshi warriors learned it, it started to become widespread. What happened to King Bumi at the end of Avatar? Well, after the war, King Bumi would continue to reign as king, helping to bring peace to an unstable Earth Kingdom, aiding Team Avatar wherever he could, and as we know, he passed sometime before 124 AG. Aang and Katara would in turn name their first son after him, and Bumi would always be remembered as the dear friend to the group and the crazy Omega level earthbender who lived his life to the fullest, as Bumi was one of the only people to see the start and the end of the war. What exactly happened to the lion turtles? Well, when Wan became Avatar, he separated the physical and the spiritual worlds. Most of the lion turtles decided to stay in the physical world, and over the thousands of years, sadly, they were actually hunted to near extinction by the same humans they sought to protect. Thankfully, however, we do know that at least one lion turtle is still alive, and that is the one we see in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And it's also good to note that this lion turtle was able to survive simply by staying hidden. It's really sad to see this be the conclusion to the lion turtle, since these were the same creatures that protected the humans and gifted them the power of bending over the thousands of years before Wan.